Picture yourself 8 million years ago, crouched on a dry East African floodplain. You're holding a jagged rock. In front of you lies the cracked skull of an antelope, and inside it sits the richest food for miles. Soft, fatty brain, dense with the exact fuel a growing body craves. You smash it open. You scoop. You eat. And somewhere in the slow machinery of evolution, your own skull is quietly starting to swell. Not today, not this year, but across 10,000 generations, the thing behind your eyes is bloating into the strangest object in the known universe. 3 pounds of electrified jelly that can picture its own beginning. You're going to grow it by eating brains, taming fire, and gossiping about your neighbors. Let's go. So here's the real question. How did you end up carrying such a ridiculous brain? And it is ridiculous. Yours is about 3 times the size of a chimpanzee's, and chimps, for the record, are not idiots. Line up the skulls of your ancestors on a shelf, and you can literally watch it inflate. An early Australopith roaming Africa around 4 million years ago carried a brain of maybe 400 to 450 cubic centimeters. Yours is around 1/350. It tripled. Now, a big brain sounds like a no-brainer. More thinking, smarter choices, better survival. But evolution doesn't hand out brains like trophies. A large brain is a monstrous thing to build and an even worse thing to feed. It overheats. It's fragile. It nearly killed your mother on the way out of the birth canal. By every rule of biology, it should almost never happen. So the mystery isn't really that you're clever. It's that nature ever allowed something this costly to exist at all. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you. There is no single answer to this. Scientists have chased it for decades, and what they keep finding is a stack of reasons that only work when you pile them together. A diet, a fire, a shrinking gut, a crowd of friends, and one bizarre accident buried in your DNA. We'll peel them back one layer at a time, from the easy stuff to the genuinely strange. And at the very end, I'll hand you the fact that quietly unravels the whole story. The twist about where your brain is heading. Right now, today. Stay with me. Start with the bill, because everything begins with the bill. Your brain is a fuel hog on a scale that makes no sense. It's roughly 2% of your body weight. It burns around 20% of your energy. The Smithsonian's Human Origins program says it flatly. 2% of the weight, but 20% of the oxygen, and 20% of the blood flow. Every calorie, every hour, awake or asleep. Think about that for a second. One organ, about the size of 2 clenched fists, quietly devouring 1/5 of everything you eat. It's like running a refrigerator inside your skull that you are never, ever allowed to unplug. And the worst part? It doesn't care whether you're doing anything useful. Solving equations? Full price. Lying on the couch watching other people cook on television? Also full price. The brain bills you the same whether you're a genius or a houseplant. Now zoom out and see why this matters so much. In the wild, energy is the whole game. Every animal is locked in a desperate accounting battle. Calories in versus calories out. And losing that battle means you starve before you breed. An organ that eats 1/5 of your budget is, from evolution's cold point of view, an outrageous luxury. It's the equivalent of a struggling family deciding to keep a race car idling in the driveway, guzzling fuel, and going nowhere. For that gamble to pay off, the brain has to earn back more than it costs every single day for a lifetime. So this is the central knot of the entire human story. Before you can evolve a bigger brain, you have to solve one brutal, unforgiving question. Where on earth does the extra food come from? You can't just wish a brain into existence. You have to pay for it. In meat and fat and calories forever. Every chapter from here is really a different answer to that one question. And the first answer is hiding somewhere surprising. Not in what your ancestors ate, but in what they stopped needing. In 1995, 2 researchers named Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler published a beautifully sneaky idea. They called it the expensive tissue hypothesis, and it's still one of the most elegant explanations in all of human evolution. Here's how they thought about it. Forget where the extra energy comes from for a second. What if it never came from anywhere new? What if you simply moved it? They started doing the body's accounting organ by organ. Brain tissue, as we said, is absurdly expensive to run. But it turns out the brain isn't the only greedy organ in the building. Your gut, the long coiled tangle of intestines breaking down your lunch, is nearly as costly. Digestion burns a fortune. And when Aiello and Wheeler measured the human gut against other primates our size, they found something odd. Ours is too small, noticeably shrunken, undersized, as if a chunk of its budget had been quietly stolen. And that was the whole insight. You didn't get a raise to afford your brain. You cut spending somewhere else and moved the money. Evolution slashed the energy budget of the digestive system and rerouted the savings straight up to the skull. 2 luxury organs, 1 paycheck. So one of them had to shrink. Picture a household on a fixed income staring at a catalog. You want the home theater and the swimming pool, but the math says pick one. So you fill in the pool, pour the concrete, and wire up the surround sound. That, more or less, is what happened inside your ancestors. They tore out gut and built cortex. It's a gorgeous theory, but it comes with a catch that's almost too obvious. A small gut is a picky gut. It cannot handle mountains of tough, raw, stringy food the way a big, roomy digestive system can. A gorilla can live on raw leaves precisely because it's carrying a gut like a fermentation tank. Shrink that tank, and suddenly raw survival food will starve you. So to pull off this trade, to safely downsize your stomach, your ancestors first needed a way to make food radically easier to digest before it ever reached their bodies. They needed a cheat. And they found one of the greatest cheats in the history of life. They found fire. Around 1.8 million years ago, a new character walks into the fossil record, and it's honestly one of the most important entrances in your entire family history. Homo erectus. Taller than what came before, straighter, built to walk and run for miles. But the fascinating part is the specific combination of traits. Bigger brain and body, and yet smaller teeth, smaller jaws, and a smaller gut. Something had made food dramatically easier to eat. The Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham has a famous one-word answer for what that something was. Cooking. In his book Catching Fire, Wrangham argues that learning to control fire was the true hinge of human evolution. More than tools, more than hunting. And his logic is delicious. Cooking, he points out, is basically digestion that happens outside your body. Heat unravels tough plant fibers and breaks down proteins before a single bite touches your teeth. So you pull far more calories out of the same food for far less work. The numbers on effort alone are staggering. A gorilla can spend up to half of its entire day just chewing raw plants, jaws grinding hour after hour like a machine that can never stop. You spend maybe 20 minutes on dinner and then go do literally anything else. And that's not a metaphor. That's your jaw muscles and your teeth physically shrinking across evolution because the fire took over the heavy labor. Cooking is the loophole the whole story was waiting for. Remember the expensive tissue problem. You can only shrink the gut if food gets easier. Well, cooking made food easier. It let the gut shrink safely because the flames had already done the gut's hardest job in advance. And that unlocked something new. A surplus. Suddenly there were spare calories sloshing around with nowhere obvious to go, except upward, into that hungry, expensive, quietly expanding brain. Fire literally fed the fire. It's a gorgeous, self-reinforcing loop. Better food, smaller gut, more energy, bigger brain, smarter foraging, even better food. Round and round for 1 million years. But raw calories, no matter how many, are only the bulk material. To actually build a brain, you need the right bricks. And the brain, it turns out, is astonishingly fussy about its bricks. Here's something they rarely mention. Your brain isn't just hungry. It's a snob. It's roughly 60% fat, and it's built out of one very particular kind, a long, delicate omega-3 fatty acid called DHA. You need DHA to grow neurons and to wire them together into working circuits. And here's the annoying part. It's genuinely hard to manufacture in bulk from a diet of grass, roots, and the occasional antelope. Your body can make a little, not a lot. So a real puzzle sits at the center of brain evolution. Where did our ancestors get enough of this specific premium building material to construct an organ this size? One striking answer, championed by researchers like Michael Crawford, points to the water. Shellfish, fish, crabs, and the general buffet of the lakeshore and coastline are absolutely loaded with ready-made DHA. So the idea goes like this. Groups of early humans who lived and foraged along shorelines may have stumbled into the perfect brain-building supermarket. No exhausting hunt across the savannah, no sprinting after prey, just wade into the shallows and pry things open at low tide. Picture your distant ancestor as a very confused customer at an all-you-can-eat seafood bar, cracking shells against a rock on the beach, quietly and accidentally fueling a neurological revolution, one clam at a time. Now, I have to be straight with you. This one is still argued over. Plenty of major brain growth clearly happened deep inland, nowhere near a coast, so seafood can't be the whole story. But the deeper point survives the debate, and it's the part worth keeping. It was never only about how many calories your ancestors could gather. It was about the exact molecules riding inside those calories. Feed a growing brain the right rare fat, and it can afford to get big, dense, and complicated. And here's where it gets genuinely strange. Once brains started getting complicated, they discovered a brand new reason to keep on growing. A reason that had nothing to do with food, or fire, or predators. The reason was each other. Here's a possibility that feels almost insulting when you first hear it. Maybe your magnificent 3-pound brain didn't get big for tools, or hunting, or making fire. Maybe to a surprising degree, it got big for gossip. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar noticed a pattern rippling across the entire primate family tree. The species that live in bigger, more tangled social groups tend to have bigger neocortexes, the wrinkled outer layer of the brain where the heavy thinking happens. Plot group size against neocortex size across dozens of primate species, and the relationship is startlingly tidy. Bigger crowds, bigger brains. He called it the social brain hypothesis. And once you sit with the logic, it stops sounding insulting and starts sounding terrifyingly plausible. Keeping track of other individuals is some of the hardest computation a mind can do. Who is allied with whom? Who owes you a favor? Who's holding a grudge? Who's secretly lying? Who's sleeping with whose mate? Who will back you in a fight and who will quietly stab you? Every single relationship is a little running simulation you have to maintain inside your skull. Now scale that up to an entire tribe, where every person is tracking every other person, and the mental bookkeeping explodes. That takes serious hardware. Dunbar even ran the human numbers through his own equation and got a prediction, a natural group size for our species of around 150 people. That figure is now famous as Dunbar's number, the rough ceiling on how many stable, meaningful relationships one human can genuinely juggle at once. And here's the eerie part. Go scroll through your own phone, count the people you'd actually feel comfortable calling out of the blue, and watch how close you land to that number. 10,000 years of civilization, and you're still running on tribal firmware. So a huge slice of your fancy brain is, unglamorously, a machine built to handle drama. Every tense family dinner, every office feud, every friendship you're quietly worried about, you're processing all of it with neural circuitry that evolution forged to survive the politics of the campfire. But calories, fire, fat, and friends together still leave a gap. Because at some point in this story, it wasn't just the diet or the lifestyle that changed. The blueprint itself changed. In 2015, a team of scientists published something genuinely startling in the journal Science. They had zeroed in on a single gene with an unlovely name, RGAP11B, and this gene has a very strange property. It exists in you. It does not exist in chimpanzees. It doesn't exist in gorillas or orangutans either. It appeared on our lineage alone sometime after we split from the other apes, when an existing gene got sloppily and incompletely copied. In other words, it started life as a genetic typo, a duplication error, the kind of mistake that usually does nothing at all, or quietly kills the embryo. Except this particular mistake did something extraordinary. RAGAP11B, the researchers found, sends a signal to the stem cells in a developing brain telling them to multiply. And then to keep multiplying, churning out extra waves of neurons and packing them into the neocortex. More progenitor cells means more neurons means more brain. To test it, they did something that sounds like science fiction. They inserted this human gene into developing mouse embryos, and the mouse brains grew larger. Some of them even began to wrinkle and fold, growing the very creases that a big cortex needs to cram more surface area into a limited skull. A mouse, carrying a scrap of human DNA, started building a slightly more human-shaped brain. Let that actually land for a second. One of the reasons you can read this sentence, ponder your own mind, and wonder where it came from is that somewhere back in the deep past, a cell fumbled a routine copy-paste job. Now, to be fair, ARSGAP11B is not the whole story. Dozens of genes shaped the brain, and evolution stacked their effects slowly, none acting alone. No single mutation did this by itself. But it does mean that part of the answer to why you are so clever is almost comically humbling. Deep in your ancestry, a molecule slipped, duplicated something it shouldn't have. And you, reading this right now, are the strange and glorious consequence. So we've got calories, fire, fat, friends, and a lucky mutation. It sounds like a clean, triumphant march upward. Now let's be honest about everything that story quietly leaves out. The clean version I just told you is a little too clean. The biggest myth to kill is the idea that this was a straight march. A tidy staircase from dim ape to brilliant human. Each step bigger and smarter than the last. It wasn't. For one thing, bigger doesn't automatically mean smarter. Here's a fact that annoys a lot of people. Neanderthals, our thick-browed cousins, actually had brains slightly larger than ours on average. Larger. And they still vanished while we walked on. Brain size is a crude measurement. How you wire an organ matters far more than how heavy it is. And the growth itself was messy. For millions of years, the brain barely budged. Then, during a stretch of violent climate swings between roughly 800,000 and 200,000 years ago, it ballooned fast. No single gene, no single meal, no heroic ancestor flipped a switch. It's not one thing. It's never one thing. It was diet and fire and climate and social pressure and luck, all tangled together, pushing and stalling for 2 million years. Which makes the final piece of this story all the more shocking. Because after all that effort, all that fire and fuss to grow the biggest brain on the planet, something happened that almost nobody expects. Here's the twist that undoes everything. Your brain is shrinking. Not yours personally. The human brain, our whole species, has been getting smaller. For most of the Pleistocene, our ancestors carried brains averaging around 1,450 cubic centimeters. Today, the average is closer to 1,300. Across studies, researchers estimate the human brain has lost somewhere around 10% of its volume. Roughly a tennis ball-sized chunk over just the last 10 to 20,000 years. Sit with that for a moment. We spent 2 million grinding years inflating this thing, paying for it in gut and fire and fat and blood, and then, right as civilization got going, we started quietly giving some of it back. Nobody is certain why, but the leading ideas are humbling in the best way. One is that as our groups grew huge and our societies grew complex, we started storing knowledge outside our own heads, in other people, in customs, eventually in writing. You no longer needed to personally know everything to survive. The tribe remembered for you. A brain, remember, is monstrously expensive. And the moment you can safely make it a little smaller and a little more efficient, evolution will happily pocket the savings. Some researchers even compare it to ants. The more cooperative and interconnected a society becomes, the less each individual has to carry alone. So here's the quotable version. You didn't get smart by growing a bigger brain. You got smart, then let the group hold the rest. Your ancestors built a mind big enough to invent a world where it no longer had to be quite so big. And that, more than any skull measurement, might be the most human thing your brain has ever done. So come back to now. You're not crouched on a floodplain cracking bones anymore. You're sitting somewhere warm, staring at a screen, running the whole of this history on the very organ it produced. That soft, folded, 3-pound thing behind your eyes is a 2 million year story you can hold in your hands. Paid for in fire and shellfish and shrinking guts. Wired by a typo, tuned by gossip, and lately, quietly handing pieces of itself back to the crowd. Every ancestor who cracked a bone, tamed a flame, or remembered a friend's face pushed it one hair closer to you. You are the latest draft of an experiment that never actually stopped. And it's still running right now behind your eyes.